point we learned about the route parameters. So how do we configure the routes? And one more topic we started discussing about route parameters. So route parameters allow to query any content directly in a component and access and display only the content in that particular component. It is used for transporting data across the components. For the two basic syntaxes you need to understand, that is how to declare a route parameter, and how do we specify the values into the route parameter, how actual values are passed into the parameter. So that means usually, so that means under param1, under parameter 1. So we have param1. Under that parameter 1, you will have value 1. And similarly, under parameter 2, you will have value 2. That means, so the values that you pass in the URL are actually stored in the reference of parameter 1 and 2. And we need to access those values. That means the route parameters that you defined. So we have to access the route parameters and use them. Technically, how we can access the route parameters and how we can use the route parameters. Let's see one point here. Actually, access and use the parameters in any component. So you can access and use the parameters in any component. You can access and use the parameters in any component. So by using an object of activated route, by using an object derived from activated route, an object derived from activated route. So you can access the parameters. In any component and use them. Parameters are in the URL now. And you want to access those parameters and use the parameters. Just like one example I showed you. Suppose we have some list component. In the list component, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and some names and details are there. Price, something, so much is there. Now what happens is, in this list component, user selects on second one. Now what I need to do is, I need to show the details of the second one in another component. Suppose we have a details component. So in this details component, we need to display the list. We need to display the details of that component, that particular second product. Now, usually what happens is, so we will pass that in the URL, HTTP localhost, and in that we pass details. Into the details, we pass that ID of that particular component. And when you pass ID of that particular component, we need to access this value and use that. We have to access and use that in details. That means in a component, how you can access and use any route parameter. This route parameter that is passed in the URL, we want to access that and use it. For that, we need an object. So we need an object. So an object. So that object should be of type activated route. So this activated route object have set of all properties and methods which are used to access the route parameters. Generally, what we can do is we can use this dot route dot a method called snapshot. Snapshot method is used to extract only specific portion of URL. Snapshot. So param map. Param map is used to map to only the parameters in the URL, and in that parameters get the parameter name. So which parameter you want, you can get. So actually this value is stored in a parameter like ID is equal to 2. Now we need to access this ID parameter so that that value can be accessed and used. For that you have to use the get method of param map in the snapshot method of route object, and that route object is of type activated route. So to access the route parameter and use in any component, generally you have to follow this technique. So what you have to do is you have to create an object private. So we are creating an object. So this object, some route, it is of type activated route. Once you configure this activated route object through that route, so this dot route, through the route we can use snapshot. So this snapshot can access a parameter map, and through that it can get. You have options like get all, so many. Get which parameter. So you have to define the route parameter name. Parameter name. You have to define that route parameter. That's how we need to configure. So that's how we need to define. So configuring the parameters, accessing the parameters, and using the parameters. First, we will see a sample of this. Then we will implement this in one complete example. We will see how to work with that. First, we will see the route parameters, how they are configured and how they are accessed. So for that, in our project, so I will open the project. So in the terminal, yeah, let's add a new component. Right. Let's add a new component in our project, ng generate component, and I defined some search component. Okay, so and here, so skip test. I am generating a component called search. Okay. Now after adding this search component, now I need to add this in the route. That search component I need to add in the routing. So then what we are doing here, so we are defining here a path. So we are defining path. Path is search. Okay. Which component to get? So component we need to get is search component. Okay. That is when you click on search component will come. Let's keep a link for this. So here we have the unordered list. Okay. Anchor, and he will put a class. So sorry, span. Yeah. And let's keep here. So a simple class as FA and FA search. Okay, so and I will just give the text as such. So that is the text defined here, such. That is just an option defined as such. And important. So for this link, router link is such. And the class is BTN and BTN danger. So that is the class we have defined for it. and BTN block. Okay. Now in the output, the new component we added, for that component, we defined a option also. You see there is an option for search. And when I click on that search button, then it opens the search. So search component is working. Now important is when I click on that search, I need to get some details. That means I need to pass some details in the URL. I need to collect. That means now this search should provide options in such a way that user can query inside that component. User can pass the parameters and user can query any content inside that component. So we need to provide some options where user can search for some contents inside the component. That means sometimes component contains a lot of details and we don't want all details. So then we can allow the user to query inside the component and display only what he wants for that particular situation. How you will allow the user to query and display only what he wants inside that component? By using route parameters. So first, in this example, we will learn how to pass the parameters, how to configure the parameters, how to pass the parameters, and how to collect and use those parameters. In order to work with an example, you have to learn 3 points. How do we configure the parameters? How do we pass value into the parameters? How to collect the parameters? So those 3 steps. So that means working with route parameters includes 3 options. That means the summary contains 3 things. Configure route parameters. Then pass values into parameters. Third, access and use parameters. So that means this is what we need to do. Configure route parameters, pass values into parameters, and access and use the parameters. How to configure the parameters? So that means we have to go into the routing module. Now search should allow to pass parameters. So then what are the parameters allowed? You have to define the parameters. And usually the parameters are defined with a /:, and the parameter name is ID. Okay. These are formal. That means references to store your values. Again, /:, so that is name. Okay, again /:, so price. There can be any number of parameters. You can define one parameter, you can define multiple parameters. Every parameter is defined with /:. So first step, you have to configure the parameters. Okay, so we done that. So we configured the parameter. Just for your reference sake, so syntactically, so we configured the parameter. So that is how we configured the parameter. So this is the first step. Okay, we configured the parameters. Second, we need to pass values into those parameters. Pass directly in the URL now. You can pass values directly in the URL. You can pass parameters directly in the URL. Or on a link click, we can pass some values. So you can directly pass the values here. So that means it is expecting 3 values. ID is 1, name is some mobile, and price is some price, and hit enter. Then it will get that search is working, but we need to collect these parameters. It is allowing those parameters. You can pass directly in the URL, or when a link clicked, I want to pass those parameters. Currently fashion is working. I click on search, it is not working. Why? Because search is expecting parameters and you have to pass the parameters. We need to configure the parameters. And we need to define the route parameters in this way. That means go to the link here. This search link is expecting parameters. So in the router link, so we have to pass the parameters. That means router link search is expecting some values. Just you have to pass the values /1 /mobile /some price. These are the three parameters it is expecting. Okay, fine. That means we are passing those three parameters here. Good. Next option is you can pass directly from the URL. In search component, we have to collect these parameters and show them. Whatever the parameters are passed into the search component, we have to collect and use them actually. Now what we have to do for that is go to the search component. In the search component TS file, we have to collect that and use it. So for that, into the constructor, I am loading. So I will create a private. I am loading. So a route of activated route of type activated route. Activated route is present in Angular router. We have to import that from activated route. Now what I can do is I can use this route and collect the values and configure those values. So we can use that route. I can collect the values and I can use the values. So initially, suppose I'm declaring here public product ID. Okay. And product name, just reasonably I'm giving, and product price. Now these three properties gets the value from the parameters and initialize them. So this dot product ID is equal to get the parameter from the route parameter value and use it here. How to get the route parameter value? This dot route dot param map dot snapshot. So we have to use snapshot. So that means snapshot dot param map, right? Yeah, snapshot dot param map, and we have the options like get. We have the options like get all. So we have the options like keys. So it is working like a map. It is working like a map. So I will just use get. So you know that actually map means it is a map. Already we know TypeScript maps. Maps usually contain a key value collection and you have to define the keys. And the key is the key that you defined in the routing module, that is ID, that is the key. So we have to use that key here. So ID, it will get that and use it. So now this dot name, this dot product name is equal to this dot route dot snapshot dot param map and a dot get, and that is the name. We have to get from that particular name. And this dot product price is equal to this dot route dot snapshot. So dot param map, and it should get from price. So dot get, yeah, get from price. It should get from price. Now all the details that you collected through the route parameter is present here in these properties. Currently we are not displaying them. They are present there, but we have to display them. Then to display, you can go to search component.html. In the search component.html, you can display those details that you collected. That means I will use a data list, data term as name. And the name is collected and stored in a current local reference, that is product name. And we are defining the ID. So the ID is collected from, ID is collected from product ID. It is stored in product ID. And similarly, we have the price, and that is defined inside that product price. This is not example. This is just syntactical concept to make you understand. Example, we will create one example and see how this is used for real environment. So this is to make you understand three things. How do we configure the parameters for route? How do we pass values? How to collect those parameters? These three things you should know. And you can see now when I click on search, those parameters are collected and used. And you can see in the URL, those parameter values are passed. And you can modify those route parameters from there. You can modify the route parameters from there. You can modify the route parameters from there. That means here simply 102, and I am writing here some so mobile or say TV and some price. I am adding some price and hit enter. Those details will be updated here. So it allows the user to directly query from the URL. That means here you can simply enter the details. It will get you those details. This kind of URLs you can see regularly these days. For example, suppose I'm using website like Just Dial. Okay. So Just Dial is a website, a simple sample website I'm showing you like. So I have a website like some Just Dial. So this is Just Dial website. So I opened this Just Dial website. So, and I'm configuring this. And before I go to Just Dial, you can see this Bing is using a lot of query strings, very complicated. It is using a lot of query strings. It's very complicated. Now observe here what we are doing now. So this is the Just Dial page. This is the justdial.com home. And when you open this Just Dial, observe the URL now. So this here, this is all the content we are having. And this is one of the single page application designed with our Angular. So Just Dial is designed with Angular. And you see here, when I click on, so any option, any category, so some automobile, then it will open that automobile category. And you can see that automatically it will pass so many queries inside that. Now when in the automobile, I'm going on searching on new cars, I click on new cars, then you can see that. So when I click on that new cars, then it will get some more parameters in the URL. Now what is the point is, if these parameters are easy to read and easy to configure, you can directly visit this page again by hitting those in the URL. So that means here now they are not using query strings. So by seeing this, you can understand that, okay, it is implementing routing technique. If there is a question mark, colon, equal, that means that is not utilizing the routing technique. So that means this is using a routing technique. That is the reason here, this you will see that user will stay separate windows, separate pages will not happen. Majority of interactions are handled in one page itself. But everything they cannot handle with AJAX. Some new details should, because data should pull from. So some database and get the details. So some pages may implement your AJAX. Some pages may not implement AJAX due to the complexity in the data that is coming in. However, everywhere it is not mandatory that it use AJAX. But the routing, because it depends on even the server side technology they are using for this. That's not only just client side. Even I told you that server side also routing is implemented. But here the point is URLs are a little bit more clean when compared to the previous. It is easy to identify exact location where you are currently. So that is easy to query anything directly from that component. You can request that component and you can pass your query into the component. Then it will search for that and show only that in that component. That makes good, right? That makes good. That means you can access and you can use it. This approach I will show you. That means how we can manage this approach I will show you. So technically, so how this works with a practical example, we will see. We will implement one example, then you can easily understand with data. So initially, what we have done in this current example. So in this current example, what exactly we done? So that means we have two things. One is configure the routes. After configuring the route, pass the values into the parameters. That means you can pass from the URL, or I just referred here localhost 4200. So slash we have search, slash we have one, slash we have TV, slash we have some price. We can do in this way, or we can pass to a router link. So by using a router link, so we can pass into search, and in that one, in that TV, in that some value you can define in this way. So you can configure in this way. Suppose I said some search, and we have to access and use the parameters in the component. Then what we have to do, we have to use this dot. So we have to use this dot route dot. So we have to define a snapshot, and in that we have param map, and we have get and the parameter. So which parameter it is, you have to define the parameter. We have to access that, and we can use that. So that means in suppose I say public, so some ID is equal to, we can access that and use it. So these are the three important things you have to know while working with route parameters. These are the three options you have to know while working with route parameters. So how do we configure the route? How do we pass the values, and how we can collect them and use them? So this example is not required. This is just to show you the approach, how it actually works. We will create one reasonable example now, so which can handle the interactions. Means where we can see the interactions, routing and route parameters used. How to configure the routes, how do we configure the route parameters? One simple example we will see. Let's take a look, how do we implement this in an example. Okay, so what our intention here is, let's close all this. Yeah. So we can open whatever required whenever required. Okay, let's close all this. Yeah. First step is what we are going to achieve. A simple example I will show you. That means what we want here is, so I want to display some collection. That means we have some data. Let's plan for data like this. That means we have data. We have some categories. And categories, usually in the categories data, we have category ID. So, and we have category name. Okay. Category ID and category name. And we have some products data. So we have products data. So it is having product ID and the product name and the product price. And it is having category ID. That means, so this category ID is mapping to the category ID. That means we have a relation defined between these two. That means it is mapping to that particular category ID. That means, so every product belongs to a specific category. We have a relationship between the categories and products. Okay. Now what we want here is, so in the user interface, we want a categories list. So this categories list should display the list of categories. We have electronics. So we have fashion. So we have footwear like this. Now, when user clicks on any specific category like electronics, then what it should do is, it should navigate. So here when user clicks, it should navigate. It is not redirection, it should navigate. So it should navigate. So from one component to another component, it should navigate to a component called some product details, products list. And in the products list, it should display only the products that belongs to the category electronics. That means now how the products list knows that it has to show only electronics. Then what we will do is we will pass this electronics category ID. We will pass that category ID. So this category ID will be collected inside this component, and it will search for the category related products, and it will show those category related products here. So this is the basic approach we need to follow. Internally, so much we can do now. So first, this is the primary approach we want. That means I want the user to select any category and the category related products should come. So, and when it is doing all the work like searching and retrieving and showing those details, everything should work with a single AJAX call. That means no page reloading when it is getting the data, new data, everything. Through routing technique, we can implement this. So then let's see how do we do that. And for this, what I will do now, just so how we can implement this type of example. Let's go here. So I will create a new service for data. Already we learned. So let's add a new service. Okay. Let's open and add a new service. ng generate service and data and skip test. So that means, so we are generating a service. So already we learned how to add a service. So we are generating a service. So by name data. Okay, service is generated. Now once the service is generated, so let's go to the data service. This is data service. And data service is already configured. It is already configured. That means it is already provided in root. Then you know what will happen. It is registered. Now, what we have to do is we need to create a method. So get categories. Okay. Later, we will do the same with the database also, with server-side technology database, how it works. Then you will have a complete end-to-end application for that. So get categories has to return, it should return the list of all categories. That means it have a collection of category ID. So category ID 1 and category name some electronics. Okay, that's it. So you can add any number of categories like that. Initially I keep 2. Suppose another one is category ID. So that is 2. And here, so the category name is some footwear. Okay. So these are the categories we have. Fine. So this categories, get categories is a method which will return the list of all categories. Okay, we will create another service method, get products. Get products is a service method which will return the list of all products. Now, when you design the products, here I will define the product ID and the product name. So the product name, some JBL, some speaker, okay, and the product price. So we have some price, okay, and here it is using category ID. So from the categories table, and that is 1. That means we just configured a relation between those two. It is an object-based relation configured. Okay, similarly, I will keep some products. And I'm defining some products like, okay, some AirPods. So I defined like some Nike casuals. So I defined like some Lee Cooper boot, something, okay. And here this is 2 and 3 and 4, the product IDs, okay. And let's put some different price. So some different price, okay. And we are adding some details here, okay, fine. And the category ID, these two belongs to 2. So because the category ID 2 belongs to the footwear. Okay, we map to some relation between these two components, these two methods that are returning the data. So a service is ready. a service is ready. So that service contains two methods. Service name is data service. Data service provides get categories and get products, which are used to get the list of categories and products. Fine. Our service is ready. And after that, now we will add some components into this. Let's add some components into it. Okay, what are the components? ng generate component. One is categories list, categories list, categories list. That is the component. Categories list, skip test. Okay. I will add another component, products list. So ng generate component, products list, skip test. So we are adding two components, categories list and products list. Okay, so these are the two components. Now important is in the categories list. So in the categories list, we need to display the list of all categories. Now we need to keep a routing for this. We need to keep a routing because user will start with categories. Then what I will do is in the app routing module, I will just keep a navigation for categories. I will keep a navigation for categories. So here I will just keep a path. So I will just keep a path, and this is for categories. And if the request is for categories, then component it should generate is categories component, categories list component. Okay. And we will keep a UI to access this. In the component HTML, we will keep a link for that categories. Then I will add a list item here. So anchor. So here I will just put here categories. So and here I just put a router link, and this will get the categories path and class. So btn and btn danger and btn block. It will get the categories. So you can see in the design, so we have the new categories link. And when I click on the categories link, so the categories list is working. So it is working fine. So when I click on categories, then categories list is working. Okay, here I want to display the list of all categories. What categories you are having, you need to display the list of all categories. So let's go to the categories component. In the categories list component, I need to collect the data from the service. Then I will inject, so a private data, it is of type data service. We are injecting that. And what we will do is here we will create a property. So a property, we will create a property called categories. Categories is an array which contains the list of all categories, because every category have a category ID and category name. So now this categories is empty. So whenever the page loads and the component is initialized, then this dot categories should get information from this dot data dot get categories. Get categories. It has to get from that get categories and use. And actually this data service is coming from some other website. So that is not good. Means some other project it is coming actually. So it is importing from some other project. That's the reason we don't have that. So actually we have to get it from our data service is present in which path. I need to check the path where it is present actually. So that means our component, because it injected the data service, but not here. So it has to get from dot slash. So we have data service. So that is the data service. From there, we need to get the data service. Once I look into the path here, I will verify because it is getting the data service from other project that we have. Already we have a project. From there it is coming. So data service. Yeah, we have a data service from the Flipkart. So that is enough, right? This is where the data service is present. Okay. So this is our, so that's the reason get categories is not showing, because in our previous project, we have only get products like concept. So you can access the service across projects in a workspace and you can use them. That is the main intention of service we created actually, right? Okay. Now this categories array contains list of all categories. Fine. It contains the list of all categories. Now we need to access the display the categories. So then let's go in the HTML. Here we want to display the list of all categories. So what categories are there we want to display? Then I just keep a heading categories list. And here let's create an ordered list. And a list item should repeat here. I'm just defining a iterator ng for, so let item of categories. And here we are currently printing, so item dot category name, because in the data we have category ID and category name. Then usually it should get the category sent to. That means, so when I click on categories, electronics, footwear, fashion, so search, when I click on categories, it will get the list of categories. Now here comes important is when I click on this category name, that means I want this category name clickable. That means that electronics, I want like clickable, footwear like clickable. So I want that clickable. Then what I will do is, if you want this clickable, then keep this in an anchor. Okay. Now when I click, what should happen? It should bring the products that belong to that category. It should bring the products that belong to that category. This is important. It should bring the products that belong to category. That means when I click on it, it should navigate to products. It should navigate to products and bring the products list here. Now, very important is here, one more point is there. Another point is it should not get all products. It should get only products that belong to this category, that belongs to that particular category. Then what we do here, for this, we are creating a router link. Okay. What is that router link? Router link is nothing but in the router link. So we will pass the category ID. We will pass the category ID. That means here, how to get the category ID? We will use a binding expression, item dot category ID. So this is a dynamic value. Item object contains category ID, category name. Category name is displayed. Category name is displayed as a link text. Category ID is defined as route parameter. Now you observe here. So you see these are the links. And observe carefully. When I click on this link, observe here. When I click on that link in the URL, it is passing categories /1. So that is important. Observe there. So I click here, categories. I click on footwear. It says categories 2. Currently, you have to know, carefully observe this. Category ID is successfully passed, but there is no path by this name. There is no path by this name. So that means in the routing, we don't have path in this format. Then what we will do is, we will go to the routing module. In the routing module, we will design that path. What is the path? Path is, it is expecting categories /:, and ID. That is the parameter. Because category ID is passed, we are using ID. You can give any parameter name. Currently only one parameter it is. Okay. Now the point is, when ID is passed, which component to come? The component should come is not categories component. It should get products list component. Products list component. products list component. It should bring that products list component and use that products list component. It should bring the products list component. That means when user, there are two paths now. Only categories, it will get categories list. And categories with an ID, then it will get the products list. Then observe carefully here. So I will refresh here, home. Okay, I click on categories, then categories list came. I click on footwear, then the products list should come. The products list should come. But important here, one more point is there. So the concept is when you are passing categories /ID and the component it has to get. So the component it has to get is the products list, The products list component should be displayed. Now we need to access that products list component and use that products list component. So that products list component must be accessed and displayed. That means here we are passing an ID, categories /ID. It should get the products list component. First, we will check whether the products list working or not. Let's save this. So let's go here. You can see products list is working. That means click on categories list will come. And you click on electronics or footwear, then products list is working. That's good. That means now when I click on electronics, products list is working. When I click on footwear, products list is working. But only the point here is in products list, we should not display all. We should display only the products that belongs to that category. That means when user clicks on electronics, only electronic products should come. That means we have to collect this ID. So that means the ID that is passed in the URL, we have to collect that. Where we have to collect it? In products list, because when this path is requested, products list component is displayed. In the products list, we need to collect that parameter and use that parameter. Now, how do we collect the parameter and use the parameter in the products list? Let's check. That means how do we do that? So now let's go to the products list component. So we are going into the products list component. In the products list component, we need to collect the route parameter passed. And how to collect the route parameter passed? Already we learned that. So here we need two things. One is private. We need data because products data is present in a data service. We have to bring data service. That means we have to inject this data service. Another, we need private. So we need another option. What is another? That is route. It is of type activated route. One is to collect the data, another is to collect the parameter. These two are important. One to collect the data, another one is to collect the parameter. Okay. So once you configured, that means now here we need two properties. So what are the two properties here? So I am declaring two properties. One is category ID. Okay. Another one is products. Products is an array. Okay. So what should category ID contain? So actually category ID, this dot category ID, it should get the category ID passed in the URL. Then you know that this dot route dot snapshot, right? Dot paramap dot get and get that ID. ID is the parameter. It will get that ID and it will store in the category ID. Now comes the important point here is now I have to search for the products that belongs to this category ID. So now where is the products date? That means this dot products, it should contain only the products that belongs to that category ID. And you know, you can use your filter method for searching. Then I will use this dot data. In the data get products, we'll get the list of all products. And it is a collection. On that, I need to apply filter. And filter based on X implies X dot category ID is matching with this dot category ID. That means the route parameter, if it is matching with the route parameter. That means you know this filtering query. We already learned so many times about how we can filter the data. And this I showed you in TypeScript also when we learned. That's the reason we spent so many days in TypeScript, because I don't need to explain every point here again. And I just need to use that queries. You know how do these queries work. That means we are searching for only the products that belong to this category ID. We are collecting the route parameter category and storing in category ID. We are searching for that category ID related product. We are searching for that category ID related products and collecting them and storing them in these products. That means products contains the list of all products belong to that category, which we need to display. So it contains the list of all products belong to that category, which we need to display. Then what we have to do is go to the products HTML. This is array which contains that. Then we will go to the HTML page, and here we want to display the products that belong to that category. So only the product name, details, anything, you can display those details here. So that means what I will do is I will create here a heading saying that products list. And here we will create a table, and we will put the class some table and table hover. Okay. And in this we are defining, so t head, so and we have tr and we have th, so that is name and the price. Only these two details we have. So we can add some more details later, right? Yes. And we have t body, and we have t body, and we are displaying here tr in that cell. So I need to get this row should be repeated. And we are using an ng for let item of collection is products. And here I need to print the item name, item dot name, and here I need to print the item price. That means item dot price. So we are displaying that. Fine. Now let's go to the design, and you see here, click on categories. It will get you a list of categories. And when I click on the categories, when I click on that categories, then it will get the products that belongs to that categories. It will get only the products that belong to the categories. And it is providing a proper filter here. And through route parameters, we are passing an ID, and we are collecting that ID here, and we are searching and displaying. Earlier, when you saw this, so you have seen, you can send one parameter to, means data from one component to another component by using input, by using output, collect the values by using custom events, right? You have seen a lot of things. But this makes a good concept for handling navigation between the components, and also the transporting of data. But if you are dealing with some secured data and transporting the data from one component to another component with a parent and child hierarchy, this is not parent and child. So that is input and output properties. You saw how to transport between parent and child. This is not parent and child, different components. You are transporting data between two different components. Products list is a separate component, categories is a separate component. So you don't have any parent and child hierarchy here. There can be parent-child hierarchy, then you can use input and output parameters. Now here, very important is you need to understand how we can handle dynamic on button click, how to navigate, how we can manage. For example, suppose now important is, can you tell me when I here how to put a link which can go back? How to put a link which can go back and get me that details. That means go back is nothing but it should get back me to the categories. And I want that to be displayed. I want that to be displayed, right? No, I am asking that. So here below this table, I want a link. Below that table, I want a link. So anchor, and this link should say back to index. Back to categories, back to categories. That means it should say back to categories. It should display back to categories. And when I click on back to categories, it should get back me to the categories, That means here, so here I am defining, suppose I am configuring a router link again. I'm defining a router link again. We are defining a router link again. And in this router link, we are configuring. So what is that categories? I said categories. Router link categories, because in the routing module, categories is getting the list of all categories. And I used that. That means I am using a router link here. And when I click on back to categories, this is not going to work actually. That is what we have to learn, because we have to handle redirections now. So we should learn how to handle redirection. That means how we can access. Of course, it will not directly work. We need to use some techniques here. Technique is very simple. Actually, what's happening now? Observe carefully. So that means if I use this, what will happen is, this is very important to remember. You mentioned this path again. You mentioned this path again. Then what will happen is, when you mention this path again, what will happen is, this path is added to existing path. Observe carefully. So already the path is category /1, and I click on back to categories. That categories is added to the existing path. That will be wrong. Now what it should do is, it should clean up the existing path and it should use this path. It should use that path. That's a simple technique actually. Generally what we do is, when you define the path is added to the existing path. When the path is added to existing path, then generally what we do is, we just define the slash here. When you define the slash here, when you configure that slash here in the route, so I click on the categories and footwear. And when I click on this, when I put slash there in the slash here, see, I put slash here. This indicates that clean up the existing parameters and start with this path again. That means it will be back to that location and it will get it. It will back to that location. That means, generally actually, so you may think like, this is not physical path. Na? Physical path means you define dot slash. So dot slash. The virtual path also can be defined dot slash. We can define dot slash. But we don't know how many parameters will be there in that particular instance. So many parameters can be there. Then in that case, one slash will clean up everything. Then one slash cleans up everything. And when I click on back to categories, it will get back to the categories. I click on electronics, it gets electronics. Only electronic products are displayed. Back to categories, it will get back to the categories. Footwear products will be displayed, and back to categories, it will get back to the categories. And remember, this same works even if you are working with database and with any server side integration. The same thing works when you are dealing with any database and server side integration, right? So just you need to handle, so the AJAX calls here through the navigation. This is not parent-child component. Actually, this is transporting from one component to another component. We are transporting from one component to another component. And you can keep the details in your own ways, right? So you can add the images, contents, you can click on them, get the details. So much is there. Now, one more point is, suppose, later we will achieve that point also. Suppose I want this product, only product name should come. And when user clicks on the product name, the product details should come. And it should display in the same component. Suppose here, what I want is, when user clicks on Nike Casuals, Nike Casual details should come in the same component below. I don't need to switch to another component. Then I want to display, so the details in the same component or beside somewhere. So in that case, if you want to access a component inside another component and show the details there, then you have to configure. Usually you have to configure the child routes. That's where we will learn about understanding the child routes, how we can configure and use the child routes. So this is the basic example for first understanding about how do we pass the route parameters. How do we pass the route parameters? So now important, how the child routes works. Configuring the child routes and working with the child route. Child route is nothing but when user clicks on that particular product, when click on the product details should come without disturbing this existing. That means we should be inside the same component and the details should come and display below. So actually previously what happening, we are transporting from one component to another component. We should not transport, we should bring the details and here and show it. This approach we need to follow. So if you want to follow that approach, then we have to configure the child routes. We have to configure the child routes. So first, you have to try up to this. This is, by watching this, it may look simple, but so at a learning level, it is a little bit complex, right? While watching, it looks easy. But while you are implementing it, it's a little bit difficult in the first stages of our learning level people actually. So once you try this and it is done, then we can see how to implement the child routes. How do we configure the child routes and how do we deal with the child routes? So that we will do better in the next session, right? So once you do up to this, I will upload up to this example. I will upload up to this, the complete example, right? Then we can go into the other options and we can discuss about them, right? So tomorrow we will continue with the child routes and how do we configure the child routes. Okay, right.